There's a conspiracy theory out there that states that aliens were trying to stop America's search for nuclear technology. So they shot down the Hindenburg as a way to distract things. Hence that flash of light on the tail end of the Hindenburg. That was the aliens shooting it down.
It's that one.
Yeah.
I think that's it. We solved it.
I entertained that for about 0.3 seconds because none of that makes sense.
I like that one.
Hello and welcome to the Day's Dumpster Fire, where we don't celebrate humanity's successes because who wants to do that? But we study and celebrate humanity's greatest failures because that's way more exciting. I am your host, Ed, and joining me as always is Kara. How are you doing this fine Saturday late evening?
Hello. I'm doing great. I binge watched a show with my husband all day today. And I slept in, and that's all I can ask for.
As you get older, that's like the only thing that really matters is just being able to sleep in, and it's the simple things.
It was so nice.
Yep, you don't have to spend a ton of money. You just sleep and watch TV.
That's it. That's all I did today.
All I did was work on today's episode. Like
I felt bad because my goal was to work on my episode, my monstrosity. And then I was like, nope.
it just ain't happening after this past week.
It'll happen tomorrow. Maybe.
So today's episode is not what I said I was going to do on the last one, because the last one with the 1904 Olympics, I mentioned something about doing like childhood star actors like Judy Garland and how their lives kind of just, they're super famous when they're 12, but by the time they're 20, their lives are ruined. Or I was going to do the Bay of Pigs. Quite a spread of of topics there, but
you got a lot of things going on.
Yes. Childhood star actors from the 1930s all the way to the Bay of Pigs and everything in between. Now the Bay of Pigs thing is going to definitely take a while because there is so many moving parts.
Yeah, that one will take a bit. That's like mine, the one I'm working on. I was like, I need time. Buy me time.
Yes. Yeah, this one is kind of like my Custer's Last Stand, where we've got like 3 major players, and it's going to be like a major player for each episode. And then I've got to be able to like tie it all together at the end. So Bay of Pigs is going to be... It's going to be a Bay of Pigs. And if anybody knows their history, that was an absolute fiasco from the minute it was executed. So today I am shifting gears in a completely different direction. And Kara, I'm going to need your help on this one because I don't know what it is that we're supposed to learn from this whole thing, just because like once we dive into like what actually happened and the causes of it and all the other fun stuff, it's just like I don't know if people screwed up as much as we think they did, because like
it could just be one of those things where you have to accept that a tragedy happens even though there's no reason for it.
Yes, and it's one of those things where humanity kind of like thought out everything, and they really did. But then, the ending of it is weird in that, like, it's kind of like what is it, episode 14, the 1919 Boston molasses flood, where like people on the outside are thinking like, how can you drown in a pool of molasses in the middle of winter? And at the end of that episode, there was the idea that molasses under pressure behaves a lot like oobleck, but, a non-Newtonian fluid, but in the exact opposite, where under pressure, instead of hardening and getting thicker, it gets thinner. That's kind of the theme for this episode, which is all about the Hindenburg. And no, we're not talking about Kara's Hindenburg German leader that ultimately resulted in the Third Reich. Yeah, that the guy just wanted to die.
Yeah, I felt bad for him by the time I was done.
Because wasn't that Hindenburg kind of like the German George Washington in a way?
Yeah.
Like he was a hero.
He was a hero, but he wasn't put up on a pedestal to the level that George Washington is.
Got it. But even still, he was retired and they brought him back from retirement to run a nation when he was like 90.
He was well respected though, for sure.
Got it. So yeah, this episode is going to be about the Hindenburg, the Zeppelin, or the Blimp. It wouldn't surprise me if they named this Hindenburg after your Hindenburg.
What year was this?
This is like 1936.
I mean, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, the Hindenburg disaster is, when I got to the end of this, when I started studying or analyzing like what actually happened, and there's a new theory out there, because ultimately at the end of the day, we just don't know why this thing burned up, but there's a new prevailing theory out there that when we combine it with a theory that I have, I think it solves it. So the Hindenburg, for those of you who don't know, it was Germany's largest dirigible, or if you want to call them Zeppelins. It's a blimp.
It's a giant blimp.
Yeah, it is. Correct. A giant sausage-like blimp with swastikas on it. But
I don't know about that, but
piece of engineering. Did you just get a bad visual in your head?
I didn't like that image. No, it's
the sausage with swastikas.
Yeah, it was weird.
Wait till you see that comes out of the tip of this thing.
Oh no!
Yeah, we'll get there. But what I want to do is, I kind of want to go back to. We'll start with part 1 here. And when we get to the end of this, Kara, I want you to be able to tell me what is the lesson that can be learned from this that we can apply to our own lives, because I just don't think that there's a lot of Hindenburgs in our lives. That I would hope not, because this is something that was kind of flukish, not necessarily man caused per se. Like there was no way anybody could imagine this problem happening other than one component. And we'll get there pretty quickly. So let's start with part 1. Man's desire to get into the air with floaty things. So humanity has always been fascinated with getting into the air. For a species that has like 0% physical capabilities to fly like birds, we certainly have a fascination with it. It's almost as though like we weren't meant to fly. That was actually a sentiment amongst many scholars going all the way to the 1800s. Is like, well, if humans could fly, then God would have given them wings.
Do you remember that part on Toy Story where Buzz Lightyear is having a moment and really realizes that he can't fly because he's a toy? And he has like this crisis and he's staring down the stairs and you know, the sad music is, yeah. I remember when I was a little kid watching it and I was like crying so upset and I ran to my mom, Buzz Lightyear can't fly. That's what I think of. I think of Buzz Lightyear not being able to fly.
Well, I think with humans, it's more like we understand that we can't fly. And we just didn't, for the longest time, we just didn't have the technology or the knowledge to actually make it happen. The French were the ones that really pioneered the first flight. They were the ones that came up with the hot air balloon, especially with anything sort of utility. In 1783, actually, no, let me backtrack. The Shu Han dynasty, what is that, 220 to 280 BCE? They were really the first ones to make like small silk balloons, and they would put like a little lantern on the bottom of it. Like, have you ever seen the end of Tangled? Or
that's for those of you who aren't as familiar, that's China.
Yes, that's not French.
The Shu Han, yeah, that's China.
Yeah, it is the Shu Han dynasty. The guy that like strapped a bunch of rockets to his back and blew himself up.
I believe it's very close. I have to double check my dates, but I love Chinese history. It's great.
We'll put that episode in the show notes because that's a fun one. It's one of those things where like, hey, if you think you really have a dumb idea, that
try flying.
Yeah, flying with gunpowder rockets on your back.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? But yeah, the Chinese were the ones that like would make those little silk balloons, and they have the little candles underneath them to heat them up. And it's actually pretty impressive. They understood that heat rises. There's a lot of things that they understood that the Western folks took over. However, though, like these little silk balloons with candles in them, these would be used for military communication. The big boys, as I call them, didn't come around until 1783 when French brothers Joseph Michel and Jacques Etienne Montgolfier. I think I got that right.
Mm-hmm.
I love that last name, Montgolfier.
Isn't it great? I actually mentioned these same guys when I did my Louis episodes.
Yes, because they were definitely around at that time, and they were really paid by the monarchy to kind of like do their thing.
Mm-hmm. And then everybody was like, "Why, if we're so broke, why are we paying these guys money to do this?"
Yeah, wait till you see pictures of this stuff because it's just
amazing. Yes, please look it up.
So over the top. Well, we'll have pictures in the show notes for you.
I actually went down that rabbit hole too when I read about it. I was
right.
Like, what?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to be around at that time to see it because it was so monumental, but then I'd want to like immediately get out of there because it's all going to implode really soon.
Yeah.
But anyways, these guys, they publicly demonstrated a big hot air balloon in Annonay, France. So what they did is they basically built a bonfire on the ground, and then they filled up a silk balloon, like a big one. This thing was like 20 feet in diameter, and they put it over the fire. And sure enough, the fire heated up the air inside the balloon, and then this balloon took off. Now, obviously, nobody was inside that thing because it was an inferno, and you would have died. But the thing is that the principle was there. People could make things fly. September of the same year, the brothers performed another demonstration before King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. Still too nervous to risk human lives, the brothers decided to attach a basket carrying a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. And I do believe you mentioned that in your episode.
Sure did. Thought it was funny.
And then I can only imagine what those animals must have thought during the whole thing. Mm-hmm. The duck may have been okay. He's like, hey, whatever. I'm in the air anyways. But the sheep and the rooster, they must have been just the sheep must have been just going off like one of those screaming goats the whole time.
Can't blame him.
No, I mean, I would have done the same thing if I was even a human in one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
On November 21st, 1783, the Montgolfier brothers sent up the first manned balloon, and now they had the two dudes in there. They went up. And it was tethered, so they weren't just flying away. But now the race was on. Now it was like, okay, humans have taken to the sky. This is where like everything changed in terms of flight capabilities, I guess you could say. And these early balloons consisted of like a raging fire inside of like this like cauldron kind of a thing. And everybody in a basket holding on for dear life. These early balloons were not controlled. These early balloons just, they did eventually, like they would have them tethered to the ground, but still they would blow all over the place. And if that fire went out, you came down real fast. It was because those silk balloons leaked like a sieve.
I believe it.
So,
which is unfortunate. Silk's expensive. Sorry.
Oh God. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. Because they couldn't use cotton because I think cotton would have been too heavy. Mm-hmm. Which is ironic because when we get to the Zeppelins, they did use cotton because it was so much stronger in certain aspects. Well, yeah, actually, they melted down animal intestines and then put them in the cotton as a gelatin, and then that made it work.
That's cool. I'm sure we'll get there. Sorry.
So time progressed. Eventually, hydrogen gas was discovered to be lighter than air. And now balloons didn't need crazy fires. In fact, you didn't want crazy fires. these next generation of balloons, they could float on their own, assuming that there wasn't any fire to be seen or a spark or whatever. There were two main downsides to the balloons, especially with ones filled with hydrogen. One, they were unpropelled, meaning that they now had no way to control the dang thing. So you get up in the air and you get rid of that tether and you're just going wherever the wind tells you you're going to go. Today, hot air balloons, they actually have vents. I guess they can open up these vents to release air and it will push them in directions. But even still, like you don't see a hot air balloon in the middle of a hurricane.
That'd be bad.
Yeah. It would just be like a rag doll just flying all over the place. And then often these hydrogen balloons had a very loose stoichiometric combination of hydrogen and oxygen. So what the heck is stoichiometry? Stoichiometry is where you work out basically percentages of chemicals or substances that you're going to use for a specific purpose, right? There's no point in it, like say if you have a chemical reaction that needs gold, do you just go find 500 pounds of gold and just throw it into the experiment and hope for the best? No, you're going to use stoichiometry to figure out what is the minimum amount of gold that is necessary because gold's expensive and we don't want to waste it. In this case, you can have a stoichiometric combination, meaning what percentage of hydrogen can you have to what percentage of oxygen to make it work? Because hydrogen is lighter than oxygen. Hydrogen is where you get your lift. Now, obviously, you would want a very, very pure hydrogen balloon, right? You don't want any oxygen in there. All things considered, an all hydrogen balloon with no oxygen is relatively safe. It's kind of hard to light that in a way. But if there's any air in there, especially if there is 2 parts hydrogen to 1 part oxygen, that's that sweet spot. Why do you think that is?
Chemistry.
What's the chemical expression for water?
H2O.
Mm-hmm. Meaning you have 2 hydrogens
And an
attached
oxygen.
to 1 oxygen.
Right.
So if you're in a situation where you have 2 parts hydrogen with 1 part oxygen in a balloon,
Mm-hmm. That makes sense now.
that means you're going to have the maximum possible explosion when that thing goes off. And it's all going to turn to water.
Okay. Yep. I'm here.
So, so yeah, they would have a very loose stoichiometric combination, meaning that quite often they couldn't make these balloons as pure hydrogen. It was going to have some percentage of oxygen in there, meaning if that thing caught on fire, it doesn't catch on fire. It just makes a very loud bang. That's it. You're now in the hands of Newton. So, in other words, these things are floating bombs, and some of the early balloonists were into a method of mixing hydrogen with hot air to get it even more lift. So they would fill this balloon up with as much hydrogen as they can, and then they would pump in hot air. And the only way you get that hot air is from a fire heating the area. So I don't know how long it took before they realized that this was a bad idea, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty quickly. On one famous flight, Jean-Pierre Blanchard partnered up with a Boston physician to cross the English Channel in a balloon that could navigate somewhat. This thing is pretty cool. What they did is I'm sorry, I missed a spot here. On June 15, 1785, Pierre Romain and Pilatre de Rosier became the first to die from blowing themselves up in a hot air balloon.
Good. R.I.P.
Or in a hot air / hydrogen balloon.
Yeah. I mean, it was bound to happen, but R.I.P.
2 years, approximately about 2 years after the famous flight in 1783. They filled that balloon up with helium or not helium, but hydrogen, and that was the end of it. So that must have been quite a show.
I bet.
'Cause, man, I've listened even to small like party balloons mixed with 2 part hydrogen with 1 part oxygen, and it is louder than a gunshot. Like it is so loud when that goes off. So
a big one? Can you imagine?
Oh, geez, like a 20, 30 foot diameter situation. That would be.
It'd be loud.
And then you hear the screaming guys coming to the ground.
Yeah.
More than likely they were tethered, so they wouldn't have fallen too far. But it was probably still be like 100 feet.
Jeez.
Eventually, the balloon with a flapper was invented, and some degree of navigation could take place. Meaning, this flapper, I think it was a dude at the back end of it with like a palm frond just flapping it as hard as they could, like Link in Zelda Wind Waker, where you had that leaf that you could. Yeah, high technology stuff here, but because of this flapper thingy, they could actually navigate somewhat. One of my favorite cases here was the flight with Jean-Pierre Blanchard, and who partnered up with a Boston physician to cross the English Channel in a balloon that could navigate somewhat.
Okay.
This was amazing. So ambitious, I will give him that. But the English Channel's far. It's like 38 miles. The aircraft wasn't sealed very well, and they started to descend so low that in order for the two men to make it across the channel, they had to throw out all their supplies. Because it's not like they had a stockpile of hydrogen sitting around. It was everything they had in there is what they had to work with. They barely made it to the other side. And this must have been a heck of a sight because nobody knew where they were going to land because, navigation. So people were running up and down the coast trying to find these dudes. And when they finally found them, they found these two buck-ass naked men cheering their success, meaning that they eventually had to give up their clothing in order to shed enough weight.
It's dedication.
Yeah. Like, like everything just went flying over the edge. And that must have been a heck of a sight too. Just like some little fisherman just sitting out there, and then here comes this weird ball-like thing, and then all of a sudden you start seeing like barrels flying over, and then you see like a pair of trousers, and then a shirt, and then a vest, just a hat. Yeah, that must have been a heck of a sight. There were a few other achievements, but for much of the first half of the 1800s, balloons kind of just fell out of interest. They really struggled to navigate, and it was really hard to keep them up in the air for any useful length of time. It would take another 50 years before some steam-powered engines, an envelope design cell, and aluminum manufacturing before we would see anything resembling what the Hindenburg would look like today. So for all the way up into the 1850s, it was just a floating ball with some dudes in it, hoping that they don't crash.
Perfect.
Part 2, the dirigible, dirigible airship.
Nailed it.
Yes. If you can go home and pronounce dirigible to your parents, they will be very impressed, if not worried, because they don't know what that means.
What does it mean?
I don't know.
Huh. We'll have to look it up.
I think it's just a style of the aircraft. It's like a long, like oval shaped type thing instead of like a ball.
Got it.
Like a dirigible can be like you can actually send it straight, but I don't know the actual translation for dirigible.
I'll have to look that up later.
Yeah, I should. Maybe I'll put that in the show notes. But essentially, balloons suck.
Uh-huh.
They are heavily subjected to any wind. They are nearly impossible to maneuver / navigate. Yes, even with motors, if your balloon experiences a crosswind, your motor can only push in one direction. So you're screwed. Like you can't turn left or right. You can only just go straight. And I think some of them actually had like a steam-powered engine in them, which that's got to have a lot of horsepower, especially back then. Sounds
heavy though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially with a 2 horsepower steam engine.
Yeah.
With materials, as they were up to the 1850s, the balloons leaked like a sieve. No one wanted to see 2 naked men high-fiving each other on the beach next to a giant shriveled up sack.
I concur.
That's basically what it amounted to.
Uh-huh.
Especially when they're just out there broing out.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Everything changed in 1852 when I think it's pronounced Henry Giffard, but if he's French, it would be Henri Giffard. I'm not sure. But when Henry Giffard created the airship, or better known yet as the dirigible, The name airship comes about because, well, imagine using a balloon that resembled that of the shape of a seafaring ship.
Okay.
The logic was that if you get a ship in the ocean, you don't shape it like a round circle.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not feasible. So instead, let's make a aircraft shaped like a ship and see what happens.
Makes sense.
So instead of being a round body kind of a thing, it's more or less like something that's shaped more like a football, where they kind of each end comes to a point, and then it's kind of like oval shaped in the middle, and they would eventually become just perfect circles in the middle, as they discovered that the perfect circle works better with a crosswind rather than having a oblong shape. As well, we'll get to it. An engine and rudder could be placed in the rear of the aircraft, and later elevator flaps to combat crosswinds could be used and be more maneuverable. So now you actually have something that resembles something that of like aerodynamic, and it can cut through the air, kind of like an ocean liner can cut through the water. And they can steer left and right, but that can be difficult, as we'll see, but you can still do it. And better yet, you can put an engine on these things and actually go places. So in 1852, he attached a small steam engine with a massive propeller. I think this thing was like 5 feet in diameter or something crazy.
Sweet.
Yeah. No, he was balling out on this thing. He was pimping my balloon. Instead of standing in a basket holding on for dear life, Gifford's ship design allowed the pilot to sit comfortably, because he actually had like a 3 foot long platform that he could just sit on, and let the 1 or 2 horsepower steam engine propel the ship forward. And it actually allowed him to fly forward, that's really the only direction, for 17 miles at 5 miles per hour.
Woo, we're moving.
Back then,
it was pretty good.
yeah, I mean, that's like a fighter jet.
I mean, hey, we're just thankful that we can turn. So
yeah, I mean, as we'll see, like once we get these things up to speed, like at 84 miles an hour, steering becomes a bit more difficult because these things are like 800 feet long, but we'll get there. The long story short of it is that this 1852 Gifford flight like changed everything. And it was like the first real advancement in balloon / flying technology. The concept of a lighter than air ship was now locked in stone. Suddenly people started to think that there is something more to floaty things that might be able to serve more of a genuine purpose. By the 1890s, dirigibles got way bigger, way faster with the use of gasoline engines and applying aluminum instead of wood. What did I write here? Instead of woodland? I was tired when I wrote this. Instead of wood, the blimpy part was no longer just a leaky sack. It was a semi-rigid sack with a metal gantry below that extended the whole length of the ship. The new generation of dirigibles are even lighter than before, despite being bigger. The big thing was aluminum.
Yeah. It's a light.
There was a time when aluminum was worth more than gold.
I believe it.
It is so funny because, like, at that time, I mean, Earth has a ton of it. It is everywhere. But at that time, it was just really hard to extract it. Whereas, like, now it's just everywhere. I think I read a story somewhere. I can't remember the name of it, but basically the plot of it was this group of people, they left their world to come to ours because our world had trees, but their world was just nothing but gold. There was so much gold everywhere that they couldn't get rid of it. Like they just couldn't get rid of it fast enough. And then when they discovered wood, they said that like the wood was the most precious thing in the world to them.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Who would ever thought that you could live in a world where like there's just too much gold? Something tells me that's not the case, but I wouldn't mind visiting there. Maybe
that would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just take this paperweight with me.
Right.
So now, like, because we now have these dirigibles that could fly in a direction with a measurable speed, like now we could put these things to work. By the 1890s, they got way bigger, way faster. The gasoline engine was the other thing, as I mentioned before. Having that gasoline engine versus a steam engine was that was another game changer, because gasoline engines are just significantly more efficient than steam, and you don't have to have fire, necessarily like an open fire near your hydrogen filled balloon. We also see dirigibles becoming considered for military use. So like the Baldwin dirigible, American inventor Thomas Baldwin built a 53-foot airship called the California Aero, which won a 1-mile speed race on October of 1904 at the St. Louis World Fair.
I'm so happy that race turned out a lot better than the marathon that was held that same year.
Or what is it? The ethnic games or whatever it was.
Anthropology days.
Yeah, the anthropology days.
That's so bad. It's horrifying.
But it must have been a crazy time to be in St. Louis in 1904. There was so much stuff going on there. Like a blimp race. Like that is just,
it's wild.
Especially if you're a kid who's never seen anything other than a bird fly. Could you imagine what it must be like to see this blimp fly over?
Right.
That would have had to have been just absolutely mind blowing.
It's around the same time that circuses were a big deal too. The circus was a big deal for the same reason. Because the traveling circus would go through areas that didn't get a lot of excitement. So, hey, here's the circus. Here's all this crazy weird things, giant tents, exotic animals, acts, entertainment. It's kind of
imagine just being like some farmer in Idaho, and then all of a sudden here's a circus and here's an elephant.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you probably have seen drawn pictures of them in books, but here's an actual elephant.
Here's one in real life. Yeah, there's no zoos at that,
no.
or zoos were really in early.
They were there, but they were only in like New York.
Yeah, they were in big cities, and even then, it was I don't quite remember. I think zoos were a product of the circus or something. They're related anyway.
That's a good question. I don't know where like the advent of zoos came from.
Yeah, I want to look that up later.
So I wonder if it's one of those things like, okay, what do we do with the animals when we're done with them?
Yeah, I want to look that up.
I'm pretty sure there's some dumpster fire ideas in that.
Oh, guaranteed. This is an interesting time.
Yes, there is. There was that one circus train that crashed.
Mm-hmm. Or P.T. Barnum's museum, or P.T. Barnum's first tent, or
just P.T. Barnum in general.
I actually thought about doing that. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. I do kind of want to look up that train accident, because there was like tigers and lions running all over the place. I could see that just being a nightmare. But anyways, 1904 St. Louis World Fair, Baldwin and his little dirigible eventually got like a military contract. In 1908, Baldwin sold an improved model with a 20 horsepower engine to the U.S. Army called the SC-1.
Nice.
And leave it to the U.S. Army or the government to take something that could be named really, really cool and to give it a catalog number.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what newspapers are for.
I got this dirigible. We call it the Raptor. And the government's like, cool, it's the SC-1. Now we're going to come into a guy that changed everything. And this is one of these things where you got the right guy born at the right time who had just the right personality. It's like Winston Churchill, man. Like, I don't know of anybody else we could put alive in Winston Churchill's time in World War II to do what he did.
We're going to get the lead out?
Get the lead out?
Yeah, that's what they say when you listen to Led Zeppelin.
Oh, geez. No, we're not getting the lead out.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
We are getting into Ferdinand Zeppelin. This guy, he was born in a wild time. If you think about it, like born in 1883 and died 1917. Like, he was a German military general, and it's like he was kind of a hero in his own right. Zeppelin, when you look at that time frame, like imagine how he saw the world change. From 1838, we're still talking people that are like fighting in Napoleonic styles to 1917 and World War I machine guns and biplanes and all that stuff. It's just crazy.
That's why World War I is my favorite World War to study.
Yes, I know. With all those guys shooting at each other with their machine guns and
while riding horses. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a trip. Such a trip. Anyway.
So yeah, born 1838, died 1917. He was a German military general who looked at the idea of the previous airships and had a brilliant idea. Instead of using ropes or nets to hold the shape of the blimpy part, and I really don't know what the technical term is for that floating, the part that actually does the floating. I don't know what that's called.
Me neither. It's okay.
I'm calling it the blimpy part.
Perfect.
So the plumpy part.
Either one.
I don't know if I like plumpy part. That sounds weird.
It's kind of cute.
The plumpy part?
Yeah.
Okay. I did a girthy part, but that still wouldn't work.
I don't like that one.
No, I don't like that either.
No. Anyway.
Well, blimpy, or actually, we'll call it plumpy part.
Okay.
Is a technical term. So
perfect.
Looked at the shape of the plumpy part in the desired shape. Use a material called duralumin, which is, I guess that's like considered at that time aircraft grade aluminum. So like you probably hear it all the time in like knives, like, oh, this uses aircraft grade aluminum. And there's different grades of aluminum. Like I think there's like 60, 68 and there's 70 something, there's 80 something. Basically like how you can have a steel that is harder or softer, or you can have a steel that has more flex to it but doesn't break as easily and all that kind of stuff. You can have the same exact thing with aluminum, and you can make aluminum just absolutely insanely light as well as insanely strong. And that's kind of what this duralumin, I think is what they eventually called it. And everybody used it. England, America, Germany, everybody was using this stuff, even though it was really expensive to make. But anyways, he used that aluminum to create like a skeleton inside the plumpy part. And basically, instead of filling the whole thing up with just one giant amount of hydrogen gas, you use like a series of bladders. So kind of like you know how like the Titanic had those baffles or those compartments that were built into it. There was, I don't know, like what, 10, 12 compartments that they could close off. And like, so like compartment 3 is flooded. Cool. Shut it off. And then that way we can't sink because It's just that one. This is kind of like the same idea, but here we use these what would be called gas cells. And so like if a gas cell popped, it's okay because we still have like 4 or 5 others that are, not popped. That was actually that was a really, really ingenious idea. And the idea was that, okay, let's build like an exoskeleton, and then we'll wrap that exoskeleton with the air bladders inside. And now you have a lot more control of what the aircraft could do. So now you could purge gas, you could deflate something, you could inflate something, you could change pressures. Like you had a lot of control now in like how is the aircraft going to be balanced. If it gets higher up, the balloons or the bladders are going to want to expand and explode. Or if you go down after you vented gas, by the time you get down, now you don't have enough gas to keep you afloat. So this air bladder design was absolutely ingenious. And because of this, we are now entering the world of what we generally consider what the Hindenburg would look like. We are now in the world of the Zeppelin, not the Led Zeppelin.
Oh.
That doesn't come around until like what, 1970s?
Yeah, I'm planning on watching their documentary later. Anyway.
On July 2nd, 1900, Zeppelin's first real working model, the LZ-1. And by the way, we will see this LZ, like the Hindenburg was, I believe, LZ-29 or 129. So he made 129 models in his time, or the company did. So the LZ-1 took flight. It did work, but it had a lot of like kinks to work out, and it did crash, but it was able to perform well enough for the government to be like, okay, I think there's something here.
Yeah. See, if something fails, it doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means we got to fix some things.
Yeah. Especially if it was able to like perform well before it crashed.
Yeah.
And through a bunch of donations, he was able to put together an upgraded model that could fly over 24 hours in 1906. So now you have an aircraft that can hang out in the air for over a day.
In 1906. See, now that to me is impressive. That's cool.
That is wild. Like that is when like an airplane at that time could only just fly a few miles at the best. Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. Now, granted, that airplane would be flying much faster, but that's okay. We're not looking necessarily for speed. We're looking for direction, and we are looking for stability.
Slow and steady wins this race.
Yes. The German government now saw the advantages of these new Zeppelins for wartime use, and by the time World War I broke out, 100 of them have been commissioned. And that is something that you do see pictures of in World War I. You see these Zeppelins up in the air. Yep. And there wasn't like there was any anti-aircraft guns at that time to really shoot them down.
Nope.
Now, thankfully, they didn't have a lot of lift, so that it's not like they could strap on a 500-pound bomb and fly over and bomb you. No, it'd be a couple of dudes and they're just dropping hand grenades out.
I think they were more used for like scouting and stuff, but yeah.
Yes. To me, it reminds me of like those videos that you see of like what's going on in Ukraine where the drone flies over with like a basket of like a grenade on it. Just drop it over the site and then they see it hit and then they just like float away. It's like, that's kind of what these things were capable of doing. But yeah, they were really used for reconnaissance. And even the Hindenburg was used a lot for reconnaissance. Zeppelin worked on a passenger model known as the DLAG or DLAG, which is, I think, Americanized for Deutsche Luftschiffarts.
Oh. I'm not going to attempt it, but
it's Luftschiffarts. Luftschiffarts.
Okay, guys. LUFTSCHIFFAHRTS. I can see where you're getting the farts, but it's funny. I am so sorry for the German-speaking people. If you are listening, we are butchering it, but hey, we're trying.
Actually, we're right.
Really?
It is Luftschifffahrt.
Excellent.
The Luft part sounds like Luft with a short U sound, as in book. The Schiff, similar to Schiff. And the farts is pronounced with a long A sound like farts.
Farts.
Luftschiffarts.
That's a good word.
That's amazing. I love the German language.
That's great. You just have to say it really angry. Sorry.
Now, yeah, our one listener is just like, 99999.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help it.
Vedala. Oh man, he's probably in Nuremberg too. Maybe that's why they changed it to just DLAG, because the Americans were just going to have way too much fun with this.
It's true.
Anyways, this passenger line DLAG was established in 1910 to be like an intercontinental ship to move civilians about. So now we're stepping away from the military side of things, and now we're getting into the people mover side of things. Zeppelin also established the Friedrichshafen, or the Zeppelin Foundation, which served to be a main development for aerial navigation and the manufacture of airships. So now, like, that's all they're going to do is just build what we would call today blimps. And boy, did they make one. 1928, the Graf Zeppelin was completed, and this thing was massive. My grandfather actually remembers seeing this thing in America. It flew over in Chicago, and my grandfather saw that for the first time, and he like freaked out. It's like, what is this thing? This thing was 778 feet long. So, about what, 2 football fields? 2 1/3?
Something like that.
Yeah. It had a diameter of 100 feet. So, this thing was a thick boy. It had a lift capacity of 191,799 pounds. That's a very specific weight.
It is.
799 pounds. Like,
I wonder what math went into that.
well, and it also depends on the altitude of takeoff.
Yeah.
So, like, if you are taking off at a higher altitude, you can't put as much on. But if you're taking off at a lower altitude, you can. As we'll see here with the Hindenburg. It had a max speed of 80 miles per hour. It was powered by 5 12-cylinder engines at 550 horsepower max. And it had a capacity of 20 sleeping berths. That's pretty big.
It's very large.
That would be the largest thing in the air at that time. The Graf Zeppelin would go on to fly 590 flights. By the way, this thing was filled with hydrogen the entire time. Helium was invented at this time, but America put the kibosh on helium because America owned all the helium that was produced because it only came from these oil mines in I think Texas or something like that. But yeah, this bad boy would fly 590 flights, including the first transatlantic flight, the first flight around the world, and the flight over the North Pole. That's not including all the flights to America and many different locations there. She flew until 1837 and was an icon of her time. She became like something recognizable of the zeitgeist of the time. Everybody knew what the Graf Zeppelin looked like.
Did you mean 1937?
Yes.
Okay.
1937. Sorry. She did not go back in time.
Got it.
My
That'd
goodness,
be cool,
could
though.
you imagine seeing something like that in 1837?
Oh my gosh, they'd freak out.
So yeah, the Graf Zeppelin, I mean, it's on postage stamps. It's just been one of those things where it's like the M1 Garand or whatever, or the Honda Civic or the Toyota Corolla. It just worked, and it worked every time. And because of this reliability, the crews that worked it were very, very competent crews. Like, they all knew each other. They all knew how to operate this thing. So like whatever came after the Graf Zeppelin, it would be well manned. By the way, I want to do a huge shout out to airships.net. That website where I got a lot of this technical research from is amazing. They've got pictures, they've got schematics, they've got the statistics, they've got the stories behind everything. Like, go check them out if you want like a very comprehensive site to go get more information on all these different airships. Airships.net. They are an amazing company. In fact, almost all the pictures that you're going to see on the website are attributed to airships.net. Granted, a lot of these pictures are so old that they're kind of like open source, or like they're not copyrighted anymore. But the fact that airships.net took the time to like compile them all is pretty cool. So be sure to go check them out. After nearly a decade of nearly flawless flights and 0 injuries, the Graf was ordered to like come back to Germany, where the hydrogen was evacuated, and eventually it sat in scraps until it was recycled for the Luftwaffe in World War II. If this thing is so amazing, then why was it returned to be decommissioned and turned into scrap? Because again, that Duralume stuff was kind of useful in other aircraft. Well, the Hindenburg happened. That's what happened. So that was in 1937, if I believe. Part 3, the Hindenburg. The Hindenburg, built March 4th, 1936, was very similar to the Graf Zeppelin, but there were some key differences that set it apart. Even though it was only 30 feet longer than the Zeppelin, Hindenburg was 135 feet in diameter, compared to the Zeppelin's 100 feet. So for those of you who remember your surface area of a circle, we factor in pi and everything like that, pi r squared, if you start increasing the diameter of that circle, its surface area, it goes up exponentially. So, yeah, it's weird. Like when you see the Graf Zeppelin and the Hindenburg side by side, you can obviously tell which one is the Hindenburg. It is clearly bigger, but it's not like, wow, this is earth shattering. Like, it's not like it's twice as big visually, but there's a lot more to it. This fatter design also gave it a bit more rigidity. So keep in mind that rigidity part. To steer these things, you have to really flex that frame, that hard structure, because the motors were on the back, but the steering was in the front. To turn that nose, you really had to put a lot of torque on the back end of that thing. So this thing had to be very, very strong, especially when you include the 4 Daimler-Benz 16-cylinder engines with a max output of 1,320 horsepower that could cruise at 850 horsepower. So the Graf Zeppelin had 550 max. This thing could cruise at 850 horsepower, and it had a max speed of 84 miles per hour, with the Zeppelin only having 80 miles per hour. So I know it's like, really, all that engine output and all that kind of stuff, like, really, that's all it could do is 4 miles an hour faster. The main difference between the two was that the Hindenburg was far roomier and was way more stable. It was said that a pen, because this thing made multiple trips across the Atlantic, the aircraft could take off, get to altitude, and you could set up a pen on a plate in the dining room, and that thing could get all the way over to Lakehurst, New Jersey, and dock, and that pen would never tip over. That's how stable this thing was. And those engines at 850 horsepower, those engines ran 24/7. They never stopped. That's a lot of work for an engine to just run like that. And these things weren't flying super high. They were flying like no more than 400 feet high. Like, they weren't going above the clouds or anything like that. So they stayed pretty low, so they didn't need turbochargers or anything. But the Hindenburg was kind of considered the Titanic of the day. It was just an absolute, like, ocean liner of an aircraft. The Hindenburg also had an innovative autopilot system, which I thought was kind of cool. So they could flip a switch and the autopilot system would automatically level it out, and it would automatically adjust, like, the air pressure of the gas cells and all sorts of stuff. Like, it was pretty clever. It was a very clever mechanical computer, all things considered. So perhaps the biggest difference was that this Zeppelin, the Hindenburg, was the first dirigible that was designed not to use hydrogen gas, but much safer helium. Helium floats, but it also can't catch on fire. Helium also has less lifting capability than hydrogen. Hydrogen, I think, has, was it like 50% more lifting capabilities per volume than helium? But hydrogen also has that problem of, exploding, whereas helium just makes your voice sound funny.
Yeah, that sounds more fun.
Well, in order to make the helium work, you actually have to make the whole aircraft way lighter.
Yeah.
So there's had to go do a lot of engineering into the structure, into the skeleton of it. The designers of the Hindenburg decided to ditch hydrogen when the British airship, the R-101, crashed on October 5th, 1930, near Beauvais, France, killing 48 out of the 54 people on board.
Oof.
Yeah, the Germans were like, okay, our time is coming. We haven't blown up anything yet, but it's going to be a matter of time, because I think in the United States the Shenandoah crashed, but that was filled with helium. But either way, the Germans were like, okay, let's switch over to helium because our time is going to be up here. Like, we can't dodge a bullet forever. Hindenburg had 14 adjustable helium gas cells that could be controlled from the control car. The original design called for an inner ring of hydrogen gas cells around the much larger helium cells, with all cells having a vent that led to the top and away from anything that could produce enough heat to ignite the hydrogen. So basically, the original design was going to be like the gas cells inside would be like these giant donuts. And then in the middle of it would be like a long cylinder of hydrogen, just to give it that extra lift. I think they did away with that idea. And they just decided, you know what, let's just stick with just all helium. And then they built a really cool walkway. So you could go from nose to tail and you could walk along the entire length of the balloon, or not balloon, but the Zeppelin. And you would have like these gigantic bags or these balloons inside of just gas, and everything had its own vent, and everything could be controlled from the control car. So Hindenburg also had special release valves on the top. So these were kind of like these valves. What they would do is they would stay closed until they hit a certain amount of pressure. Once that pressure got up to a certain point, the valves would open up and vent the gas out. The higher the altitude you go, the more the balloons inside are going to want to expand. So it's kind of like, you know how when they send up those weather balloons, right? And they got to go all the way up to like the edge of space, and they only look like they're like a quarter of the way full. Ever notice that?
Yeah.
That's because when the higher up they go, the more that balloon swells, the more the gas wants to expand.
Okay, that makes sense.
And when they actually get up into space, then there's absolutely no atmosphere compressing it. And then the balloon pops and then everything falls down. So that's the reason why they're like that. So yeah, basically, if the Zeppelin got high enough, then it could vent gas. And then it would bring itself down as necessary. But then it also had autofill features. So when it got down, so like if you're getting, say, like 100 feet above sea level, well, suddenly all that you have that atmosphere pushing down on those gas cells. Now there's not enough lift. So then they had these gigantic compressed hydrogen tanks that would then automatically refill the bladder. So like this thing was self leveling, I guess. It would, if you set that thing for like, say, 350 feet above sea level, it stayed there. And it didn't matter if it lost. In fact, it did. It would lose 20% of its gas going over the ocean for a very, very specific reason, but it would always maintain the pressure in those gas cells. Very impressive stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's almost like they thought this through.
What?
Those Germans. The gas cells are also made differently. Previous dirigibles or Zeppelins were made from gold beater skin, which I had to look that up. Basically,
that's weird.
Yeah, gold beater skin. I guess they call it gold beater skin because this material they would use to extract gold from like sleuths and stuff like that.
Okay.
Still, gold beater. That's just an interesting name.
It is.
I kind of want to name like a kid Gold Beater.
I wouldn't do that.
Nah, you'd be better off called Sue than Gold Beater.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
But anyways, gold beater skin was basically made from the outer layer of cow or oxen intestine. So basically it was a giant sausage casing. And if you look at it, it's like translucent and it's like crinkly and it feels like plastic.
It's fun.
But it's actually cow intestine.
Cool.
So yeah. So when I said that the Hindenburg looked like a giant sausage-like thing, I wasn't wrong.
No. Not at all.
However, though, the Hindenburg used a very different material that they actually got from the Americans. It's amazing up to this point, like how much the Americans and the Germans worked together. I thought this was even when in the late 1930s, it was amazing how much America and Germany, even when Germany was under Nazi rule, how much like they worked together on stuff. I always thought that was kind of interesting. But what the Americans came up with, they used a special material what they did is they took gelatin, which is You can use pig's feet, cow's feet, horse feet, whatever. You take their hooves and you boil it and boil it and boil it. And that's actually where we get gelatin from. So when you buy a package of Jell-O and you mix it up, put it in the fridge and got this gelatinous red mass, that's actually just horse hooves rendered down. But what they would do is almost make like a composite. They would take a sheet of cotton, they would slather this gelatin all over it, and then they would sandwich it between two other layers of cotton to create the fabric for the gas cell. So it was very flexible, but because of that gelatin being sandwiched in between, it was very strong. Like, it was probably the strongest materials, the most space age stuff ever at that time. And it was very simple. It's and even to this day, like, I know they're doing research on like Mars habitats. So like, how do we build a habitat on Mars that won't just fall apart on us? That's what they're doing, is they're basically taking a thing like cotton and they're embedding it with like a resin of some sort. And then they're sandwiching it between two other things. And it's like it's a very, very strong and airtight material. Hindenburg structure was built mostly out of duralumin. A lot of it they bought from the British, the R101, which I thought was kind of funny. They're like, hey, so what are you doing with all that leftover R101? Guess, do you want it? Yeah, we can use it.
Recycle.
Yes, especially this stuff because it was very expensive. It was actually purple in color. So when they manufactured it, they would put like a purple lacquer coating over it, over the finished part. I'm not too sure why. Maybe to identify it as like that duralumin stuff, but yeah, it was a highly sought after material. But the R101 was sold and then reused to establish a 15 main ring connecting 36 longitudinal girders with a triangular keel at the bottom for rigidity. There's a lot of geometrical terms there.
Yep.
Basically put, the way that it worked is that the Hindenburg was divided up into 15 main rings. And as a result, you could hold 16 gas cells in there. And in the middle of all that, there was a walkway, as I mentioned before, and we'll have pictures of it on the website. There was a walkway that goes from the nose all the way to the tail. That way, people could access every gas cell as needed. Like they could check on everything. And there was the same thing on the bottom of it. The bottom of the Hindenburg was made out of like a triangular shaped scaffold. It was very rigid, and that's where the living quarters were. That's where the cruise quarter was. It had to be very rigid, just because they didn't want people like swaying around inside, because nothing like getting seasick in the air. So that walkway, I have to imagine that there was no smoking signs everywhere.
During this time, maybe not.
What's really funny is that people would walk up and down that walkway smoking.
Yeah. It's just kind of what people did. Like, I don't know. It's hard to describe without going into a full, like, historical, detailed context of
Well, it's like that lady that I knew growing up. She worked in the munitions factory in World War II, and her job was to pour the powder into the bullets. And then her next partner would press the bullet in. And that's all she did for like 16 hours a day for the entire war. And like they all, like the whole line of these bullet pressers smoked cigarettes while they were just pouring gunpowder into each bullet.
They thought nothing of it. It was just really like, I'm doing my job and I'm having a cigarette while I'm doing it, just like everybody else.
When I figured too that like if anything goes wrong, they're erased. It would be such a quick death. You wouldn't even know what happened. And I'd imagine it would be the same way in there, other than like, why?
Now we think about it and we're like, oh, that's not a good idea. But
yeah, that's like that's not only do you get lung cancer, you run the risk of blowing up the whole factory.
Yeah, there's a lot of things wrong with it, but hindsight 2020, right?
Yeah, they did have pretty interesting lives. I will say that. The skin of the Hindenburg was made from a metallized fabric that was designed to block two types of solar radiation. This was incredible. I know Mythbusters they tested this is they basically covered the whole entire skin of the Hindenburg with like this silvery aluminum oxide component, and they tested it to see if it was flammable. It's very flammable, but this was very clever. And again, you cannot discredit German engineering. This material was designed to block two types of radiation from the sun: ultraviolet and infrared. Ultraviolet light, this radiation has a tendency to wear stuff down, like synthetic things like fabrics and rubber, plastic, and all that stuff. Imagine going out, I'm sure everybody's seen this, like you go out to your backyard and you see like a plastic lawn chair that's been sitting out there for like 5 years, and you feel it and it's really chalky and it's kind of brittle. That's because of UV radiation destroyed it. It happens a lot in Arizona. Maybe not so much on the East Coast, but it happens a lot here. That like the ultraviolet stuff can really wreak havoc on those gas cells. Like they really wanted to protect those things. So that was pretty clever that they were able to come up with something that could block that. And then the other thing, and this is the reason why it was silver in color and kind of shiny, is that they needed to block infrared. So infrared isn't destructive like ultraviolet, but it is also the source of heat that comes from the sun. So if you stand outside on a sunny day and you feel the warmth coming from the sun, that is because you're being blasted with infrared radiation from the sun. It's not radiation that'll kill you, but it's how we can't see infrared, but we can feel it as heat. Take a flashlight, shine it in your hand for a while, like a really, really bright flashlight. Your hand will start to warm up. That's infrared radiation. Again, we can't see it, but we can feel it. But this infrared radiation could cause the gas cells to heat up and cause the pressure to rise and then vent gas before it needs to. So like by minimizing infrared radiation, it really stabilized those gas cells, which I don't know. To me, I thought that was just really impressive. Now, the control car. This is that thing in the bottom of the Hindenburg that has like all the windows on it. And it's very small in comparison to the rest of the craft, but this thing to me, I could have an hour just going over the control car because it's very, very small. It's maybe about twice the size of a minivan. So imagine like two minivans side by side. That's about how big it is. Or one of those econo vans. So two econo vans next to each other. I'm not going to go on for hours about this because the engineering nerd in me is just, I just giggle like a schoolgirl just looking at the pictures of it and everything like that. But it's very, very simple, and I'm just going to kind of skim over the basics of it. The whole ship, including the engines, could be controlled in the car. Well, hence the name, the control car. However, unlike ocean ships, after all, that's what inspired the whole design of the rigid form airship. Instead of one wheel to steer the craft left and right, the Hindenburg actually had two. One wheel controlled the rudder, which steered the ship left and right. So that wheel would be, you'd be looking forward out of the windows, and there was windows all around. It was really cool. Like you had almost a 360 degree field of view. So you would have like a regular wheel in the front, like a ship's wheel, and you would turn it left or right to steer the ship or the aircraft left and right. Then you had another one that would control the elevators. And the elevator is those flaps in the back that go up and down. And that's how you change the pitch of the aircraft. That wheel was off to the left. So it sat perpendicular to the rudder wheel. And you would actually have 2 or 3 guys on each wheel at all times. And the reason being, especially that elevator wheel, if you're moving and that giant mass and you've got to try to like pitch up or down, it could take a couple of guys, including the captain, to actually turn that wheel to get the flap to go to the angle that you need it to.
Dang. Because
there's just so much air moving over an 800-foot long object hitting those flaps in the back. Like, that was even using pulleys.
That's crazy.
Like that was using pulleys. If they had hydraulics, it probably would work better. But yeah, like it took 2-3 guys each to maneuver this massive beast of an aircraft around. And if it was a windy day, may God have mercy on your soul.
How big were the wheels if it took 2 to 3 dudes to steer it? They must have been pretty big.
They're about 4 feet in diameter.
Okay.
So nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
It was just all done with pulley systems. And again, if they had hydraulics, it probably would work better. So like that's one of the things that Americans did with like their bombers is they had two systems. They had a hydraulic system, which made like a bomber way more agile. Like you could just, well, it's like your car. Whenever you steer your car, you're using hydraulics. Whereas if you had a rack and pinion, now you had to like fight the car and you're relying on gears and everything like that. But like American bombers, they used both a hydraulic system and then another system called a fly-by-wire. And that was more like a pulley system. So it would still work, but you'd really have to fight the plane and just don't do a nosedive. The Hindenburg only had fly-by-wire.
Got it.
Probably because it doesn't break.
Yeah.
Like it's very reliable. You had teams of people, 2 different airmen operating these wheels, and they worked very closely together. And what's interesting is that the captain really didn't do much. The captain would just stand back and watch his crew. There would be like 6 guys in this little econovan, like double econovan size thing. And these guys, they would run everything. And the only time the captain would get involved if there was a disagreement or if there was some expertise needed, if there was something specific that the captain needed. Otherwise, he backed off. He did not micromanage anything, which I thought was kind of interesting. So the crew breakdown is 1, you have a captain. Then you have 3 watch officers, 3 navigation officers, 3 ruddermen or helmsmen, 3 elevator men. So you have 3 guys turning the thing left and right, 3 guys pitching it up and down. You have a chief rigger. Don't tell my middle schoolers that. A chief rigger or sailmaker. 3 riggers or sailmakers. So I'm assuming these were the people that would actually like go in and do repairs on the gas cells. In the 1800s, a sailmaker was the person that would work on the sails. Obviously, the Hindenburg doesn't have sails, so I'm assuming they would work on everything from the skin of it to like the gas bladders and all that kind of stuff.
I just picture a bunch of dudes working with a bunch of patches and glue and
yeah, they're slapping it on. Yep. They're slapping, just trying to just plug all these holes.
Very likely, probably not how that worked, but that's just what my brain told me.
Yeah, I do know like they could actually go out and they actually had special harness rigs where they could go on the outside of it while it was in the air and do repairs on the skin.
That's cool.
If needed.
Yeah, that's neat.
That's not cool. That's ballsy.
Well, it's cool. I mean, I don't know. During this time period, everything was ballsy, from the construction of skyscrapers to washing a window, like all of it.
Yeah, nowadays it's ballsy if you could use a chainsaw.
Yeah.
So you had a chief radio officer, and then you had 3 assistant radio officers. And these guys, all they did, because again, the Germans were all about safety. And the flight path they would take, they would be radioing into every landmass that they could see, asking for weather reports. That's all they did, was they just wanted to know radio reports, which I thought was kind of cool. Then you had a chief engineer, then you had 3 engineers, and then you had 12 mechanics. So these people actually lived inside the engines. So we'll have a picture of it on the website, but like the engines were kind of like on a scaffold that sat outside of the aircraft, obviously because of, hydrogen. These compartments were, again, they're about the size of a pickup truck. And you could have a couple of these mechanics just sitting inside the engine room, just working on it while these things ran 24/7. And you would actually have like a little 1 foot wide walkway that went from the mechanics quarters in the very tail end of the ship. And you would just walk out on this little 1 foot wide path out like 6-7 feet to get to the engines while you're at 300 feet up in the air. It's a really trippy sight to just be like, dang, people were built different back then. You had a chief electrician, and then you had 2 assistant electricians. The crew were given a great deal of flexibility and discretion. Lieutenant J.D. Reppy, who flew on 4 transatlantic flights of the Hindenburg, wrote, Captain Lehman of course, would be on the bridge for the landing, but generally acted in the capacity of observer and only gave an order when he considered that some phase of the landing was not going as it should. One officer handled the engines, and he used his own judgment as to slowing, stopping, or backing the engines to have little or no ground speed at the instance of landing. Another officer had charge of the ballast. So the ballast is like a bunch of water they keep on board to like balance it out. That's I'll go a little bit more detail about ballast here in a little bit. And here he was also exercised his own judgment as to when to drop ballast and also as to when to valve hydrogen. So meaning valving hydrogen, meaning you open up a vent and you release hydrogen out of the gas cells. The remaining officer coached the elevator men as to the altitude and sometimes would order the ship valved if it appeared necessary. He also watched the ruddermen to some extent, but in general, the rudderman maneuvered the ship himself as necessary to keep in the wind and pointed towards the landing point. So basically, the dynamic here is just like, because the Graf Zeppelin lasted and flew for so long, they were able to train so many people. And like in the case of the Hindenburg, that the control room had 6 captains in it, because that's how experienced these guys were. These weren't like lieutenants. There weren't any like sergeants. There weren't any. No, these were all ship's captains, and there were 6 of them working this thing. It's just really weird. And it wouldn't surprise me if Gene Roddenberry kind of was inspired by that dynamic when he came up with Star Trek. Because when you look at, especially like Star Trek Next Generation, Picard, he gave a lot of autonomy to his officers. Like, you do what you feel is right, and then get with me if you need help or whatever. It's a very interesting way of leadership. So in other words, the Hindenburg was operated by a crew of people that worked together, and each person's judgment was taken seriously. So this isn't like when we look at the Hindenburg going up in flames, this isn't like an idiot got everyone killed, right? This isn't somebody being neglectful. This isn't somebody, screwing around and making a mistake. And it's not like the engineers were cutting corners. That's why I need your help to come up with a lesson at the end of this, because I'm just trying to think like, man, how do we avoid this in the future, especially in our own personal lives? During transatlantic flights, the airship would fly between 300 to 400 feet above sea level. I thought it flew higher than that, but no. They wanted to stay under the clouds so they could keep a close eye on thunderstorms, and they would radio in constantly to any land source that they saw, asking for weather predictions. The Germans considered the Hindenburg an all-weather ship, but they still erred on the side of caution. They were worried about lightning strikes, even though it was designed to handle lightning strikes. It's interesting that lightning does not necessarily ignite hydrogen. Which I thought was kind of interesting. It takes a lot of electricity to ignite hydrogen. They were worried about lightning strikes. Perhaps one strike is okay, but then they were also concerned about multiple strikes weakening the frame or subsequently weakening the gas cells. Hydrogen or helium, a weakened gas cell could cause a lot of problems. There was a smoking lounge, which I thought was interesting, but it was like located in the middle of the living quarters. And it was pressurized. So they pressurized the smoking room to make sure that no hydrogen, if it was leaking anywhere, could make its way inside and blow the whole works.
Hey, at least they thought about it.
Yeah, it's a pretty clever, again, a pretty clever idea. Only problem is that it pushes all the smoke out to like the living quarters and all that crap. But back then, everybody,
it's just
everybody smelled like smoke. Yeah. It was just the way it was. They kept a very close eye on gas pressures. It seems as though like almost every crew member could operate the gas levels if needed. Like everybody was trained on it. It was more like at the back of the control car, and every crew member could look at, and it was like this array of like 16 knobs, and then you had like these pressure gauges above each one. And there was like an art form of opening and closing and venting and releasing. And like they could look at the gauges and be like, okay, we need to increase the pressure in airbags 1 and 3. And then let's vent some air out of, 15 and 16 to help level it out as necessary. So it was a pretty interesting dynamic that they had to go off of. While traveling, as I mentioned before, they would lose about 20% of fresh hydrogen. It was purposely vented out of the top. And I'm thinking, like, why? Why would you want to do that? Well, if you are releasing hydrogen out of a hole, oxygen can't come in. Whereas if everything is sealed through the process of nucleation, meaning at the atomic level, air can still make its way in. Like oxygen can still make its way in. It's like the reason why, like, you get like a party balloon. They don't stay inflated forever. They always leak out. And that's because at the atomic level, air particles or helium particles can work their way out between the molecules of rubber. And it's the same principle here. If you just lock up everything and don't let anything out in a controlled way, then oxygen can work its way in. And what happens if you have a 3 million cubic meters of hydrogen being mixed with 1 part of oxygen?
That's a big boom.
Yeah, the Hindenburg wouldn't even catch on fire. It would just pop. It would just explode instantly, as opposed to like just burning to the ground. That's why they vented hydrogen out. They purposely vented it out and then they refilled it so that it prevented any oxygen from getting in there. Not to mention, too, oxygen ruins the lift capacity. It was like basically poisoning the gas cells, which, again, I thought that was like, oh, I never would have thought of that. To maintain equilibrium, constantly replenish replenish hydrogen would be dumped into the gas cells. This meant that a steady stream of hydrogen is being vented, but a steady supply is being replaced, making it impossible for oxygen to contaminate the gas cells. It was added much to the cost of operation, but it was immensely safer, as I do air quotes. Now, wait a second. All this talk about hydrogen, but I thought this thing was designed to be filled with helium. Like, where is the helium in all this? Well, there's a couple reasons why. The Hindenburg was originally designed to operate with helium. However, America had a complete monopoly on helium. And in 1927, it passed the Helium Control Act. This basically forbid any American company to sell helium outside the U.S. I don't know what America was using all that helium for, but they're like, other countries want it, you're not getting it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's just like, I mean, I do know that helium is a relatively rare substance, and they do get it from the oil wells and stuff like that. But there will come a time where there won't be any helium left on Earth because it's going out into space. But to make it, I think in 1936, the other thing was that Germany couldn't get their hands on the helium before, but they were like, let's design it to be used with helium just in case America decides to, not be buttheads and make it, so we could buy it. However, though, in 1936 to 1937, there was a guy by the name of Hitler and his little Nazi a-holes. Their system didn't really jive with the democratic system of America. And America was like, oh, no, Hitler. We are holding on to this helium. You can't touch this with a 10-foot pole. Basically, Japan at that time had an easier chance of getting helium than Germany did, all because of the whole Hitler thing. So hydrogen it is. They can't get their hands on it. That's fine. Like, Germany had a long history of using hydrogen airships without any incident. They knew what they're doing. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing. All's well.
Oh, crap. I nearly forgot about the living quarters. Like, that's what this whole thing was built for. Okay, there were 2 decks. A deck was for the passengers and it was located above B deck. This deck had 25 double bunk cabins that were tiny. They were like the equivalent of like a bathroom size. I think they were maybe 6 feet wide. And I'm looking at a picture of it here, and you had like a little ladder to get up to the top bunk. And you had like a sink and like a little cloth table, and that was it. Me personally, if that thing was filled with helium, I would have flown on it. I would give it a whirl. Like, why not, dude? Like, going across the ocean, in a balloon, heck yeah. But yeah, I guess the novelty of it is that you're flying in a freaking dirigible. So just like live with it. And this was only designed for very wealthy people. Like you were movie stars, you were politicians, you were business moguls. There was no steerage in this thing. A one-way ticket was $400 US back then, which is about $9,000 today. Is there a coupon?
Well, that's also, we're in the height of the Depression. So
yeah, especially 1936. It was pretty bad. So but even still, like there were still plenty of wealthy people. I mean, even at the height of the Depression, America was what, 17% unemployment?
I don't remember the exact percentage.
Yeah, for me, it was Germany. Like Germany, man, but they were also climbing out of it since like 1934, 35. Yeah, that was Hitler's way of like, that's it. We're no longer in debt because I say we're no longer in debt. Oh, okay. It was all steerage in a way, and only the very wealthy or the affluent could hitch a ride. Surrounding the sleeping section is where you would find the observation promenades, eating area complete with a full-time chef and kitchen, a writing room, passenger lounge, complete with a portrait of Hitler himself. That is right. You cannot have a luxury airliner like this without Hitler somewhere present. But yeah, it was really cool. Like you had this observation deck where they had like these little train, like what seats like that you would see in a train, and they sat by the windows and you could just look out. And again, you had almost a 360-degree field of view of everything. Especially designed grand piano made from aluminum and only weighed a third of a wooden one. I think this thing weighed 300 to 400 pounds, whereas a normal wooden grand piano would weigh about 1,000 pounds. A dining room hall that was perched near the observation promenade. So like you would have like this large banquet table type thing that you could eat dinner at and look out the windows. It was, I think it was really inspired by like cruise ships and stuff like that, where no matter where you're at, you can look out and see something cool.
Yeah, probably.
To top it all off, the decorations and furniture was designed by the very famous designer Fritz August Bauhaus. So look him up. I kind of like his style and his designs, but it's very simple, but yet very functional kind of stuff. B deck was more or less for the crew and their living situations, like a small mess hall. However, in B deck, everyone would find gender neutral bathrooms. So look, Nazi Germany being gender neutral. It's more like they just didn't care, like their bathroom stalls.
Yeah, it's efficiency over social politics.
There was a shower. However, though, reports indicated the shower's water pressure was closer to that of a seltzer bottle and rather than an actual shower.
Sweet. Hey, at least there's a place to get clean.
Yeah. But then again, though, you're only on this thing for like no more than 2 days.
Yeah.
Because it could cross the Atlantic Ocean in 2 days, maybe get down to Brazil in 3. Yeah, you're not getting all sweaty and all that other fun stuff. So, and something to note too is that the Hindenburg didn't have any water reclamation. Whenever you run an engine, one of the byproducts is water because you're burning air. That water, like I think it was in the Graf Zeppelin, could be collected and then used for ballast or used for showers or whatever. The Hindenburg didn't have any of that. It was just whatever water was stored on board is what it would have until it landed. The B deck was interesting because there was also 2 exits. One exit had a gantry that went to some more crew living quarters in the back of the ship. That's where the engineers and mechanics lived. That was closest to the engines. And then the back of the ship is where you could also find the chief officers and engineers, mechanics and whatnot. And they would have a walkway that would go out to the engines even when it was up in the air. There's a picture of it on there. It's a dude like walking out to the engines. It's absolutely insane. Man, that's just, to me, it's just mind blowing. The other exit went to the electrical room and then to the control car. And well, we already talked about that. Lastly, this is also where all the cargo was held, and surrounding the whole crew quarters were these massive, like 300-gallon compressed hydrogen tanks. So if something blowed up there, oh boy.
Yikes.
I want to go through this real quick because I'm kind of running out of time here. Fun fact. Some people think that the Hindenburg went down kind of like Titanic did, like on her maiden voyage. It didn't. The thing actually flew 63 flights before its tragic end. June 1936, it made a surprise visit to England. Just decided to just pop up there over West Yorkshire. And I guess the priest of the Hindenburg dropped like a parcel out asking, hey, whoever finds this letter, could you like put this little package by my dear brother, Lieutenant Franz Schulte? He's at this grave. He died in a prison camp in England. Many thanks to your kindness, John P. Schulte, the first flying priest. And 2 boys did actually find it. And I'm assuming they actually did drop that parcel off at the cemetery, which I thought that was kind of cool. Just
I like that story. Yeah, that's a fun story.
This is random box flying out of the sky. Oh, okay. I don't know if they did or not, but the other reason is historian Oliver Denton. He thinks the surprise visit was more or less to fly over England's industrial complexes and take pictures.
Yeah.
I could totally see that.
Same.
July 1936, Hindenburg broke a record for the fastest trip from Frankfurt to Lakehurst. We're gonna hear about Lakehurst. Lakehurst, New Jersey is like the airport for blimps, like for all one of them. That is where, like, if you're going from Germany or England or France or whatever to America in a Zeppelin, you're going to Lakehurst. Like, that's all there is to it, because it was a gigantic field and it could handle all that space that these blimps would take up. October 8th, 1936, Hindenburg became known as the Millionaire's Flight, which it did like a up and down coast flight of New England, carrying 72 of the wealthiest people in America, including future ambassador to UK, Winthrop W. Aldrich, future governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller, Juan Trippe, founder of and CEO of Pan Am, and then WW1 flying ace, Eddie Rickenbacker, president of Eastern Airlines. And then, of course, in the summer of 1936, Hindenburg made an appearance at the opening ceremonies in Berlin to help announce the upcoming visit of Adolf Hitler. And then there was like many other flights all over the world, including South America and Africa, as well as Europe. All in all, the Hindenburg was a very tried and true, reliable aircraft, well built, well manned, and well maintained. There was no major incidences to record, and it seemed as though the aircraft would remain a staple in the skies for quite some time, until around 6 p.m. at Lakehurst, New Jersey on May 6, 1937, where the age of the airship would come to a close. Part 4. Oh, the Humanity. Hindenburg's last flight took place on May 3rd, 1937, carrying 36 passengers and a crew of 61 with trainees. This was the 63rd flight. Hindenburg was on what was now a routine flight. The path would leave Frankfurt, Germany, and it would essentially head west until it hit like a portion in France, and then it would head north and hit the southern tip of England, probably taking some pictures of the industrial capabilities all along the way. And then from there, they would head west. The strategy was simple. They actually followed the old sailing paths, because the Coriolis effect would make that, what is it? The transatlantic wind? I can't remember what it's called.
I don't remember.
Like during the summer, that's when you would sail, because you would go up and around the northern part of the Atlantic and come down to the Americas.
Yeah, sailors used to use that all the time when they were on the Atlantic trade route. Yeah,
the transatlantic current, or I can't remember the name of it, but they would just follow that because the wind would do all the work for them. So yeah, they took off at 7:16, they got to England, and then they started heading out to the United States at around 2 a.m. the next morning. And then from here, nothing happened. It was only a 2-day flight to get to Lakehurst, and the passengers and crew really had nothing to worry about. At this point, I want to mention an important fact. The control car and the entire Hindenburg itself was operated by 6 different captains. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. You'd be thinking having 6 captains and they would all just be fighting each other for authority and all that stuff. No, they actually got along fantastic. They all knew each other. They all worked together. They all worked under the Graf Zeppelin, as part of the Zeppelin company, they just knew each other. So the guy who was in charge, like the commanding captain, was Max Pruss. And then you have Captain Albert Samt, who was the watch officer. And then you have Heinrich Bauer, who was the other watch officer. And then you had Walter Ziegler, who was a watch officer. And then you had Ernst Lehmann. Remember, we mentioned him earlier. Mm-hmm. And he was an observer. And then Anton Whitman was an observer. These were the guys that would control the rudder. They would control the elevator. They would all control the gas levels. Like they would all like take turns doing different jobs in that control room. It must have been a really cool sight to see these guys like working together and not just fighting and all that kind of stuff, as you would expect to have that many captains in one room doing. It was later noticed that the airship was facing a strong headwind and it was slowing them down. When they were scheduled to get to Lakehurst at 6 a.m. on May 6th, the landing was moved to about 6 p.m. on that day. So they bumped the landing back 12 hours. Captain Max Press ordered the aircraft to fly around New York City when Lakehurst commanding officer Charles Rosendahl, and this guy, look him up. He's a very competent and experienced leader. He's got a very extensive military background and a lot of experience with Zeppelins himself in America. He told Pruss to fly around to buy some time for the storm to pass through due to all the winds and the potential lightning strikes. So New Jersey was getting hit with like a thunderstorm, and Rosendahl just told Pruss like, hey, just go drive about for a bit, take a scenic route, come back when I let you know the storms are gone. Okay, fair enough. Again, the Americans and the Germans, despite their political differences, they really work together a lot. So basically with Rosendahl on the ground and his crew, we have like another competent person in place here, which was kind of cool. Like normally you'd have like one idiot running around. No, we now have 7 people, including the ground crew, that were very experienced, that knew what they were doing, and not a one of them was screwing around. By 6:12, Rosendahl messaged the Hindenburg and told Pruss that the wind's temperature and air pressure had died down, and the conditions should be suitable for landing like now. For some odd reason, Pruss didn't get the message, or it took some time to get back. But by 7:08, Rosendahl sent another message that he strongly recommends Captain Pruss bring in the Hindenburg ASAP. So Hindenburg came back. Hindenburg's approached the Lakehurst, New Jersey landing site shortly after 7 p.m. at an altitude of 600 feet, but Hindenburg was approaching from the southwest. This is a tricky situation because for a winged aircraft, because a crosswind wants to push the aircraft to the left, or to the right. A left blowing would want to blow the aircraft to the left. That makes it very difficult to try to land when your plane is drifting off to the left, as opposed to like just staying straight and narrow. It's even worse for a Zeppelin because it's a round mass, which means it has a resistance coefficient of exactly 1/2, meaning that 50% of the aircraft is going to be affected by this crosswind. Yeah, just broadsiding an 800-foot long cylinder. It's not as easy as an airplane, even though you're flying like at 10 miles an hour. So Press decided, like, okay, we're going to come in from the southwest because the wind is coming from the east. We're going to head northeast, go over the Lakehurst side, and then basically fly around in like a giant oval, and then make a left-hand turn, and then fly straight for a bit, make another left-hand turn. So now he's heading south, and then make another left-hand turn, and now he's flying east. So basically he made 3 left-hand turns coming from the southwest, and that way he is now heading into the wind, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll have a map up of like the path that he took, and that was sound procedure. That is exactly what you're supposed to do. Yeah, coming in straight and right into the eastern winds, sound maneuvering. As the ship was coming about after the second left-hand turn, First Officer Albert Samt who was in charge of the ship's trim and altitude and was assisted by Watch Officer Ziegler, who watched the gas valves, and assisted by Second Officer Heinrich Bauer on ballast, valved 15 seconds of hydrogen into the air from the gas cells. Meaning, okay, guys, we got to lower the altitude, and then we're going to release this gas by that will get us to make the ship less buoyant. Basically, yeah, they're just venting hydrogen out into the air to lower everything. So far, so good. Right now, they're starting to descend. I think they get down to about 300 feet or so. As Captain Press was in the midst of making the third left-hand turn to head straight into the landing site, Sampson noticed that the airship was suddenly tail-heavy, meaning that the airship was starting to like point upwards, which isn't good for landing. You need that ship to be perfectly level with the ground. And I think they would dock the nose of it up to like this tower that I think was like 50, 60 feet up in the air. And there was two dudes standing on the top of that tower that would be responsible for literally putting a hook on the nose of the Hindenburg when it came in. Like that just seems that's just a lot of bigness coming at you.
Yeah. That's terrifying. No thanks. I don't want that job.
I mean, that's precision though. Like, got to give him credit. What Sam did then, since it was starting to point upwards, he valved 30 seconds of gas out of cells 11 through 16. So basically, the gas cells at the very, very tail end, that was like number 1. And then number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 was the very front gas cell. So when I'm mentioning like 11 through 16, that would be out of the front. So like the first or the very front 5 gas cells. If I'm mentioning 1 through 5, that's at the very tail end. He vented out like 30 seconds of gas from 11 through 16. That would make the nose less buoyant. And then when he noticed that after he vented that gas out, like it still didn't work, Sam ordered 3 drops of water. I like how they just say, oh, just dropping water, totaling about 2,400 pounds. That would be out of the back. So that 2,400 pounds would hopefully make the back of it less heavy and start bringing it up. And Zeppelins operated much like submarines, right? You had these tanks that you could fill with water that would make the submarine heavier. Goes underwater. You could push out that water out of the ballast tanks, and then it would want to go up. Zeppelins work the same exact way. On top of dumping the water, Samt valved out an additional 5 seconds of gas from the nose. So Samt here is like trying his best to get this thing to level out. And he's like, for some odd reason, it's not working. Like, this is what is going on. The only conclusion is that there had to be a leak. When this didn't work, 6 crewmen were ordered from the back of the aircraft. So these would be like mechanics. They were ordered from the back to go the whole length and go hang out at the nose, where there was like 6 other dudes just chilling up there. And they would just, they were just there for weight. Just try to weight that nose down as much as possible. It's funny how delicate this balancing act is. At this point, Captain Press stepped in, which was uncharacteristic. Normally, he would let his officers do it, but when he started to see that things weren't working, then it was like, okay, I've got to step in here and try to figure this out. At the last minute, so they were approaching the mooring tower head on, like due east. And at the last minute or so, the eastern wind was now blowing southwest. So now they've lost their headwind. That's a problem. So to fix that, Press ordered the ship to steer hard to port, meaning like just steer really, really, really hard to the left. And then what they're going to do is make like a little loop-de-loop. And they were going to go from the left, pointed up towards the north, and then make another hard turn and whip the tail around so that the tail would be pointing north and the nose pointing south. And then they would approach that mooring tower. This is what's known as an S-curve.
So just picture like 6 to 10 dudes just heaving and hoeing all these wheels.
That's the thing. Yeah, there would have been 6 guys in there just trying to wrench these wheels as hard as possible.
Yeah.
Not to mention, too, like the engines were working super hard. 2 of them were shut off because they were getting ready to dock. And like they just trying to torque an 800-foot long lever. Yeah, that I can't imagine what those guys were going through in there. Press continued their approach to the mooring tower at about, it's 180 feet above. That's what they got the aircraft down to. 180 feet, that was enough to drop the landing ropes. And the landing ropes are crazy because like dozens of dudes would come out, like grab these ropes and they would help guide in. Like they would be on the ground guiding in this gigantic blimp to the mooring tower, which I guess, hey man, if it works, it works.
Yeah.
No one to let go.
Yeah.
After a few minutes after, so I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes after 7:21, the ropes had all been dropped and observers noticed a flash of light towards the back, like the back end near gas cells 5 on the port side or the left side. So you've got like these 4 gigantic fins, like one on the top, one on the bottom, one on the left, one on the right, on the back of it. And that's where like gas cells 4 and 5 were located. And some of the people were like, what's that flash of light back there? That's kind of weird. Lakers commander Rosendahl later described a mushroom-shaped flower or flame bursting from the front of the upper fin. This was confirmed by R.W. Antrim, who was on the ground and on top of the mooring tower, as well as Navy Lieutenant Benjamin May, who was with Antrim on the tower. So there's 3 dudes that all confirmed, like, hey, there was like a weird flash of light going up there. From here, everything happens in 35 seconds. So everything that I read off here until we get to part 4 happened in 35 seconds, which is terrifying. Suddenly, there was a muffled explosion, and the entire back end of the ship was engulfed in flames. Observers on the ground reported seeing flames on the inside of the aircraft making their way to the front. Other people on the ground noticed that in these first few seconds of the fire, pieces of duralumin frame were melting and raining to the ground. That's how hot that fire was. The skin of the Hindenburg caught on fire and vaporized instantly. It seemed as though there was absolutely nothing inside or outside of the aircraft that was immune to this fire. Like, to see burning aluminum, that is very, very hot stuff. Once the front of the ship was pointed about 30 to 40 degrees to the sky. So at this point, there's no back end. Now the thing is really kicking up because, well, there's nothing holding the back end up. The fire wasted no time in traveling from the gas cell to gas cell, heading up to the front of the ship at a terrifying speed. So you remember that walkway that I talked about in the beginning, like to get in the middle of the craft that goes from nose to tail? That's where people could check all the gas cells and everything. Observers noticed that at the very, very nose of the Hindenburg, they saw flames in a blue-white color shooting like dozens of feet out the tip.
Yikes.
That is a very hot. A blue-white fire is like a blowtorch.
Super hot, yeah.
In fact, they called it the torch, or the blowtorch effect. Remember earlier I mentioned that they ordered 6 crewmen to come from the back up to the front to hang out with 6 other guys to try to like balance out the Hindenburg. Well, that's where they were when all that went out the nose.
Yeah.
So these 12 guys, I think 10 out of the 12 were incinerated instantly.
Yeah.
Because of this. Anybody who is like the furthest away from that nose stood a chance of surviving. But yeah, those guys died just instantly. And you can see it on the video where the like there's just flames blowing at the nose of this thing. It's pretty crazy. As for the passengers, they actually stood a little bit better chance of surviving. A lot of them were on observation promenades watching the landing process when the tail caught fire. Some reported hearing like a muffled explosion, but most knew something was terribly wrong when the back of the observation promenade started to tip down violently, and then like everybody went sliding down to the back of the promenade. Like, oh, that's not supposed to happen. Those who could reach a window would jump out, It only took a few seconds for the tail end of the craft to hit the ground, which meant that the living quarters and the promenades and all that stuff up front would only be like maybe 10, 12 feet off the ground. So at that point, jump out. There were a lot of tragic reports, though, of folks dying because instead of jumping out to save themselves, they ran into the living quarters and tried to get their family.
Oh, that's sad.
According to airships.net, the fire spread so quickly, consuming the ship in less than a minute. The survival was largely a matter of where one happened to be located when the fire broke out. So the folks that were the remaining folks, like the engineers and the mechanics that were in the back of the ship, they were gone. They were just no way they could survive.
Yeah.
But the ones up the front towards the living quarters, you actually stood a surprisingly good chance. Passengers and crew members began jumping out of the promenade. Windows escaped the fire and the burning ship. Most of the passengers and all of the crew who were in the public rooms on deck A at that time of the fire, close to the promenade windows, did survive. There were those who were deeper inside the ship in the passengers' cabins. They just didn't have enough time.
Yeah.
If they had maybe another minute, they could probably make it work. One passenger, John Paines, the New York manager for the Hamburg America line, which handled the passenger reservations for the Deutsche Zeppelin Reederei, was in the dining room when the fire broke out, encouraged to jump by the ship's photographer, Carl Otto Clemens, who escaped from one of the windows and survived. Paines instead left the dining room to go find his wife, Emma, who had returned to their cabin for her coat. Both died in the fire. Mr. and Mrs. Herman Donor and their 3 children, Irene, 16, Walter, 10, Werner, 8, were also in the dining room watching the landing, but Mr. Donor left before the fire broke out. Mrs. Donor and her 2 sons jumped to safety, but Irene left the dining room in search of her father, and both of them died as a result. Given the speed with which the Hindenburg burned, survival for the crew was largely a matter of luck. As the diagram that we'll have on the website shows, as the diagram below shows, those who were close to a means of exit at the time of the fire generally survived, including 9 of the 11 of the engine cars, men in the engine cars, and 10 of the 12 men in the control car. Those who were deep inside the ship, such as the electricians in the power room along the keel, or Max Schultz in the smoking room bar on B deck, or those in the starboard side, since the flaming ship was rolled slightly to the starboard as it hit the ground, were generally trapped in the wreck. And the men stationed in the bow were exposed to the column of flames that rose through the ship as the bow pointed skyward. The 9 men who were closest to the front of the ship at the time they could not find their remains. The only way that they were able to figure out where those 9 men were that were in the front of it was based off of the captain's orders that was written down and that was recovered. That was the only way they know who those guys were. So within 30 seconds, the Hindenburg was lying flat on the ground like a mangled skeleton in an inferno. It was still burning, and it burned for quite some time. Chief Petty Officer Frederick J. Bull Tobin and his Navy men descended onto the wreckage to try to find survivors. So if you ever watched a video of the guy saying, "Oh, the humanity," if you ever watch him or watch that video, you see all these Navy men just go running towards it. And it's a very iconic picture. It's like, it really stands testament to how the how the military men viewed this. It was like, they don't care who was on there, they just got to get them out as much as possible. But by the time this thing fully burned down, it was literally just a heap of aluminum scaffolding, and that was it. There was little traces of anything else. The final toll. Shockingly, as well as tragically, out of the 97 souls on board, 62 survived. That kind of blew my mind. Like, given how fast this happened and how violent it was, that's pretty impressive. Like, 62?
Yeah.
Now,
you lost less than 30 people.
Yeah, 35 people. Now, those that did survive, many of them suffered burns and broken body parts and whatnot, because he just jumped out like
yeah, of course,
10 to 20 feet. But Thankfully, the ground was really muddy.
That actually does help.
And the reason why it was really muddy is that whenever you burn pure hydrogen with oxygen, what do you make?
Water.
That field was, it was still pretty damp from all the rain, but all that water from that burning hydrogen, it was actually kind of like raining almost because of all the water that fire produced, which again, that's kind of weird, but a lot of them landed in just mud and then just trying to like climb out of it and get somewhere. 13 of the 36 passengers and 22 of the 61 crew died alongside one civilian on the ground landing party, Alan Hagman. I bet that poor guy just looked up and then just saw this 800-foot long flaming mass. Like, well, my time is up. Like, you're not going to be able to outrun that. So it's just, The following morning, over the radio, the following recording was played over and over and over again, and this should sound familiar.
It's starting to rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It bursts into flames. Get it started. It's crashing terrible. Oh, my, get out of the way, please. It's bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between it. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's like 400 or 500 feet into the sky, and it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the flame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the fans are just screaming around it. I told you, I can't talk to people. There's friends around there. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen. Honest, it's just laying there, massive smoking wreckage. And everybody can't hardly breathe and talk and screaming. Lady, I'm sorry. Honestly, I can hardly breathe. I'm going to step inside where I cannot see it. Charlie, that's terrible. Listen, folks, I'm going to have to stop for a minute because I've lost the voice. This is the worst thing I've ever witnessed.
Pretty sure everybody in the world has heard that. At least the humanity part. That reporter, Herb Morrison, he later said that he was saying, the humanity, because he honestly thought like everybody was dead. Like there was nobody that could survive that. And he was kind of shook up after that. I think anybody who witnessed something like that would be a little shaken up. I remember as a little kid listening to that, and I would be laughing like, dude, get a grip. Like, dude, calm down. Until I got a little older and realized like, oh dear. My grandfather remembers that as a kid, woke up. Of course, the family always turned on the radio, and they were playing this recording over and over and over again. And that's how my grandfather found out about the fire. And it's just like any other person, like anybody who remembers like where they were at in 9/11, right? It's just one of those things where it's such a massive unexpected event that you kind of just burns into your brain. So that's what America woke up to the following morning. So part 5, the aftermath and lesson learned. The next day, 1,500 various sailors and Marines and law enforcement surrounded the crash site. Both America and Germany wanted to conduct an investigation to figure out just what had happened. Well, they knew what had happened. They just wanted to figure out, how it happened. Hundreds, if not thousands, of civilian onlookers converged on the site trying to get a glimpse of things or even take a piece of the wreckage as some morbid souvenir which made the investigation even more difficult. And I don't know if there are actually pieces of the Hindenburg out there. I don't know how much of it actually made it out.
Could be some out there in the world, like family heirlooms or hiding in antique stores.
Like a scrap of aluminum or some rivets or something like that. I'll have to look that up. Because also, how do you verify it? It's like...
Yeah, how do you know that's legitimate?
Yeah, you could take any piece of aluminum and just burn it for a while. But yeah, once like all these thousands of people were just like converging in on the site, they were trying to just grab like a piece of it. And that like really messed up the investigation. So that's why they had all these military guards out there and everything. Just like, guys, back away. regardless of the rising tensions between America and Nazi Germany, both sides put down their differences to get to the bottom of what happened. It seemed like, and I couldn't get this vibe, but it wasn't like Germany was pointing a finger at America, and America wasn't pointing a finger at Germany. It was more like, okay, what happened here? And I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm sure there were newspaper reports out there like blaming Nazis and all other fun stuff, but both sides conducted their investigations, including getting eyewitness accounts and even trying to get a hold of the schematics of materials used from Germany. But the Nazis were pretty secretive about all that stuff, and they were kind of cagey on releasing specifics of the schematics to the Americans, especially like what was that skin made out of and all that other fun stuff. To this day, like we don't know exactly 100% how all this went sideways, but there's a number of theories out there that I'll try to explain real quick, from like the least probable to probably what I think is the real cause. So the first one, aliens. There's a conspiracy theory out there that states that aliens were trying to stop America's search for nuclear technology. So they shot down the Hindenburg as a way to distract things. Hence that flash of light on the tail end of the Hindenburg. That was the aliens shooting it down.
It's that one.
Yeah. I entertained that for about 0.3 seconds because none of that makes sense.
I like that one.
Elvis.
Just kidding. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's just insulting to the people who died. This one is a bit more reasonable, but there's political terrorism. There was a lot of anti-Nazi sympathizers out there, both in Germany and in America, and the idea was that somebody would put a bomb on there, or somebody would try to sabotage it or whatever to make the Nazis look like they're not competent. There is that idea of political terrorism. I can kind of see that. I just don't know how that would make it work. There's also the theory that American British spies tried to shoot out or poke holes in the gas cells of the Hindenburg, which could explain the leak on cells 4 and 5. Okay. So somebody was on the ground with a rifle just like trying to shoot holes into it. Like, okay, I guess you're going to need a lot more than just some bullet holes that to bring that thing down. A popular and what I think could be a very plausible cause is a lightning strike. There was a storm nearby and it was starting to rain, and it was the largest and tallest thing in the whole area of a flat field. Where does lightning strike? It strikes the tallest thing that it can. So if somebody wanted to hold on to the theory like, oh yeah, no, it was definitely lightning, I wouldn't blame them. I think that's a very valid way. Now we start getting into like the findings. Both the Americans and the Germans basically concluded that static electricity was the cause of the explosion. The idea is that when the storm passes over, it generates a lot of static electricity between the clouds and the ground. That's where we get lightning from. However, though, the Germans and the Americans differ in terms of the nature of static electricity. On the American side, the Hindenburg was floating over, and people on the ground reported that they saw like glowing parts. They saw like a bluish glow around different aspects of the craft. And that's a type of static electricity called St. Elmo's fire. So it's basically like a static electricity that hovers over something. And a lot of people reported seeing something that was like that. And the Americans said that, like, okay, there was clearly a leak in the back, and it just took that Felix fire stuff, or that Felix at St. Elmo's fire, and that,
like the movie.
Yes.
If it helps you remember.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, they think it was that current, and that's a static electricity thing. It's a phenomenon that you see on sailing ships and whatnot. And that phenomenon was enough to trigger the hydrogen explosion in the back. And a lot of eyewitnesses did claim that they saw that, like, that bluish glow. And it's literally all it is like, you know how when you like shock yourself with static electricity and you see a little flash of light? But if that static electricity has nowhere else to go and the static around it is super, super strong, it'll just kind of like float there for a few seconds. It's really weird. And you got to have a really massive surface and you've got to have a lot of metal to make it work. But the Americans said that's what caused it. When you combine that with the leak, that makes sense. The Germans were like, no, it had to be a hard, strong spark. It had to be like the mother of all electric shocks. And that's both of which are static electricity based, but one is based off of observations of seeing that St. Elmo's fire. The other one is based on like a hard, almost like an internal lightning strike. That both are very strong possibilities, but I think it gets a little bit more complicated than that. And then this is where we get into what I think is the nature of what happened combined with my own theory here. And because I teach school, that makes me an expert. And I have all the credentials to like really put my own take on this. So Professor Konstantinos Giapis, professor of chemical engineering at Caltech, has a very compelling theory that is actually testable. Many observers testify that they saw that glowing parts on the surface of the aircraft mentioned or moments before the explosion. This is where the Americans agreed that the buildup of static electricity that caused the problem. However, according to Emily Velasco, who wrote an article titled Histories and Mysteries, Caltech professor helped solve Hindenburg disaster, wrote that the American committee theorized that the hydrogen was ignited by a phenomenon known as a corona discharge or St. Elmo's fire. This soft leakage of high voltage charge from the surface of something occurs on the mass of ships or on airplane surfaces in flight during a stormy weather. In contrast, the Germans' investigation committee suggested that a high intensity spark had instead triggered the explosion. So the Americans think it was that St. Elmo's fire, and the Germans think that it was a strong uber spark, for the lack of better words. So Giapis tested this on a piece of simulated skin material from the Hindenburg using an abundance of static electricity, and then he grounded it. So the idea was that the static electricity is what triggered everything when they dropped the ropes. So when they dropped the ropes hit the ground, and now the static electricity can be discharged somewhere. And because it was raining out, the ropes were wet, and that conducted the electricity up from the ground into the aircraft. And somewhere, whether it was that St. Elmo stuff or it was a strong spark, that's what started it. So Giapis tested this theory. So he connected ropes to the ground and nothing happened. Well, there was like thousands of volts of static electricity involved. Then he sprayed water on the skin. So that his sample, he sprayed water on it as though it was raining, and suddenly large, powerful sparks were jumping the gap between the fabric and the frame holding it up. The skin of the Hindenburg was actually lifted above the metal frame. There was actually a whole bunch of little struts on the inside that suspended the skin away from the rest of the frame. So when you see it and how it has those straight edges on it, that's actually the frame using another piece of something that doesn't conduct electricity to keep it off from the frame, if that makes sense. So basically the skin did not touch the metal. It just kind of like sat above it, probably because they didn't want the skin, which was metallized, to be in contact with the aluminum frame, because whenever you have metal touching metal, you start corrosion, which would just weaken the skin and all that stuff and cause all sorts of problems. So they separated the two. You see this in home air conditioning systems. You'll have like a copper return line that goes to your compressor outside, and then it'll be connected to an aluminum fixture that goes into your compressor, and they have to put something in between those two metals. Otherwise, if those copper and the aluminum touch for too long, they'll corrode each other. And then you have like what you had, where everything leaks out, and then you have a hot, nasty night ahead of you. That's kind of what the Germans were trying to avoid. Again, that's brilliant. I never would have thought of that. So once he sprayed water on the skin of it, sparks were jumping the gap between the frame and the skin. That basically proved the Germans' theory that it was a very strong spark. And then like Japanese was trying to figure out like, okay, so then why did this take place 3 to 4 minutes after the ropes were dropped? Like, why would it do that? Why would it take so long? Shouldn't it just be instantaneous? The thought was that the Germans thought that the ropes needed to be sufficiently wet in order for electricity to conduct from the ground up to the aircraft. But Giapis tested it, and he tried it both wet and dry, and both conducted electricity. So it didn't matter if it was wet or dry. The ropes were the thing that caused that charge to take place. Now, the question is why did it take so long? Why did it take 3 to 4 minutes? This is where it gets interesting. So you remember how like the Hindenburg was coming up from the southwest, and it kind of had to make that weird, like, make a left-hand turn, go straight for a little bit, make a left-hand turn, then go straight, make a left-hand turn, and then head in eastwards towards the mooring tower. By doing that, given the proximity of the storm, the outside of the Hindenburg, that skin, was just absorbing a bajillion positive ions. The outside of it was positively charged, like static electricity, but it's positively charged. Okay. When they dropped the ropes off the side, because they didn't know how positively charged the skin was, how could they know? Nobody could have known. Well, when they dropped the ropes off the sides, those ropes are connected to the frame of the aircraft. When those ropes hit the ground, then negative ions came from the ground and electrically charged the frame of the Hindenburg with a negative charge. So the outside was positive, the inside was negative, and it was just separated by a few inches of like insulation, right? Because remember, the skin doesn't actually touch the frame. It sits on these insulators. That basically turns the entire aircraft into a gigantic capacitor. So what a capacitor does is that it holds a bunch of positive ions on one side, and it holds a bunch of negative ions on the other side until the current gets high enough. Then it can jump, like the two can meet, and then the capacitor will dump all its power at once. That's what a capacitor does. It's almost like a battery in a way, but you're not using any sort of chemicals or whatever to generate the power. You are dumping electricity into it. And so like one part of it is going to be positively charged. The other part's going to be negatively charged. And then when it gets high enough, they both can meet up in the middle. Like they can jump that gap. And then all that charge can just leave at once, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that sits well. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
So Giapis did some math. And he's like, oh my God, for a capacitor the size of the Hindenburg, and let's say the skin of it is so positively charged, like it's just so positive, it's so happy about life. When they drop those ropes down to charge up that capacitor, he calculated that it would take about 4 minutes to do it. So when the ropes hit the ground, it would take 4 minutes to charge the skeleton frame on the inside. It would take 4 minutes for it to get fully charged before the positive and the negative ions could jump that gap and then release all the power at once. So basically that flash of light that they saw at the back end of the Hindenburg was actually all that current jumping the gap between the skin and the frame separated by that insulator. It was jumping that gap, and then who knows how many hundreds of millions of volts dumped right into that leak, and kaboom. Because otherwise static electricity alone isn't enough to ignite hydrogen. It just doesn't work. Now, to finish this off, where did the leak come from to begin with? So here's my theory. Because even with all that static electricity, that shouldn't be enough to light it. Like if everything was still inside those gas cells, nothing would have happened. They would just discharge the current and somebody would get a doozy of an electrical shock, whoever grabbed that rope. But nothing would have happened. Remember when Captain Press started to make those 3 left-hand turns, and he kind of made those 3 turns kind of tight? Mm-hmm. Well, by doing that, he was putting a lot of stress on the frame of that aircraft, right? Because he also had that eastern wind coming at him. So he was trying to turn left, right, to head west so that he can make another left-hand turn, to make another left-hand turn, to head to the east to get to the mooring tower. By doing those turns with that kind of wind, like, it took 3 dudes to turn those wheels inside, as we mentioned before. That is the torque. When you look at those motors in the back, those motors, which are connected to the frame, are now, it's like, the best way I could describe it is, okay, take a broom and then hold it at the very, very, very end of the handle, and then hold that broom handle out at arm's length, and then try to lift that broom up using your wrist. Could you imagine like how hard that is? Well, that's exactly what I think was happening with the Hindenburg when they were making those turns. You had the energy source in the back trying to swing around like 700 feet of a gigantic Zeppelin with all those winds on top of it. Like, they were just torquing the holy living crap out of the back end of that thing. And they did it 3 times. And then to make matters even worse, they did it a 4th time when they did that S-curve, and the S-curve was even tighter than the original 3 were to begin with. But you'll notice that after the second turn, Somt was reporting like, the back end is dropping. Like, why is the back end going down? And that's why they were like venting air out of like 11 through 16. They were, getting rid of ballast water. They were trying to put air or gas into those back ones. And they're like, okay, cells 4 and 5 are the ones most affected here. Cells 4 and 5 is where they saw the flame initially start. Cells 4 and 5 also have these cables, these taut cables that kind of give it like internal support. So like these cables would go in between the gas cells, and they would be kind of like tensioned. That's what kept the thing as a circle, were all these cables that would go through the diameter of the craft. When they were spinning that ship around after the second time, it put so much torque on the frame that those cables snapped. And when those cables snapped, it ripped holes into the gas cells of 4 and 5. And I looked it up on the schematics. There were like 4 cables that crisscrossed the whole diameter of the craft. And I looked at where the engines were, and gas sacks or gas cells 4 and 5 is right where I think the most amount of torque or leverage was being applied from swinging that nose around and having those motors or those engines trying to twist everything. That was enough to twist the frame, snap the cables, and that's what cut the bags open to begin with. And then you combine that with the whole thing being a giant capacitor with all that leaking hydrogen gas. And it wasn't just like a leak. It would have been like a rupture. So like when they vent hydrogen out, they do it in a very controlled manner so that there's no way that it could catch on fire. But this was probably just dumping out at a huge rate. And then all it took was that spark. And then that's it. It's all over. So that was the end of the airliner. That was the end of the Zeppelin-like blimps. They were never made again after that. It was just considered too dangerous, and the helium was just too expensive to be commercially viable. We do have blimps today, but they're obviously way smaller, and like the Goodyear blimp and stuff like that, but nothing like the Hindenburg. Like there will never be anything like that again, unless you see the movie Up. After all that, Kara, what's the lesson here, dude? Like, what is the takeaway from this? Because I just don't feel like this is a traditional dumpster fire.
Sometimes it might be better to go with nature than to fight it.
Okay.
So they probably should have either waited longer, gone somewhere else, instead of trying to fight the storm and go through it. Because when it comes to Mother Nature, you can't fight it.
I like that because there's got to be a point where, and we saw this with the Torrey Canyon oil spill. They were running behind and they tried to take a shortcut. The autopilot was engaged. They didn't know that they were fighting the ship and they ran ashore. Here they were behind, but I didn't get a sense like, oh my God, somebody's going to lose their jobs if they don't land it here soon. But they figured, hey, we've got 63 flights in with this thing. We can figure this out. Like, we know what it's capable of. But they should have been like, no, let's not risk it.
Yeah, don't chance it.
And I think that's a really, really tough thing about life is like, when do you risk something and when do you don't?
Right.
Because if you don't risk anything, you get no gain.
Right.
But you also got to be prepared to lose everything.
It's got to measure the risk.
I guess.
I wouldn't.
But in this case, I don't even know how they could measure the risk.
I wouldn't fight Mama Nature. I'd be like, nope, we're waiting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're already running an hour late. So it's just like, who cares?
It took them an hour to respond when they're saying now or never. And then you wait an hour. You're like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, that Rosendahl was like, it's now or never, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
But I mean, they had the capabilities of staying up probably for days longer if necessary.
Yeah, just should have waited. Don't fight the nature. The other thing too is when it comes to accidents that happen in nature, it can be a hard thing to accept. So a lot of people want to point fingers. They want to blame spies, politicians. We're in the middle of a war. It's aliens. But in reality, it's
definitely aliens.
It's just a really bad accident that happened because nature took over. And that happens. And sometimes we just have to accept it and learn from it.
And it is a classic case of like the Germans really did think of everything from the ultraviolet to infrared light. They thought of everything from like venting the gas, like having automatic vents that could expel gas if necessary to keep it level. They even thought about putting insulators in between the frame and the skin of the ship, knowing that the two are metals and they would react together. But it's one of those things. It's like it is a failure of imagination, and sometimes you just got to be prepared for that. That you're in a mess right now because you just didn't think of something. But guess what? The next time you will.
Yep.
And in this case, they're just like, we're done. And here's the thing, though. The Hindenburg was already on the way out. Like, airplanes were now flying over the Pacific. It just wasn't like the Hindenburg was becoming more of a novelty.
Yeah.
It was at the early stages of it. But it would have been like one of those things where I want to take a train across the country. No, I can hop into a plane and get to New York in hours, or right. I could spend like 4 days in a train going across the country. You would want to do it because of the novelty of it.
Right. So you can stop in different places when the train stops or whatever. Kind of like a cruise, but not as luxury, I guess.
Yeah, same thing. I can get to Hawaii in 5 hours, or I could spend like a day or two on a cruise ship. Right. Like, how do you want to approach it? That's the Hindenburg, folks. Be sure to check us out on thedaysdumpsterfire.com. There you will find all of Kara's art contributions and whatnot, plus other articles, our show notes, and daysdumpsterfire.com. You can also find links to, like iTunes, Amazon, whatever. We're on every platform, and be sure to tell a friend or a family. Easiest thing to do is just grab their phone and show them how to do it. In case if they don't know what those podcasts are, email us at thedaysdumpsterfire@gmail.com.
Message us on Instagram. We're at the Days Dumpster Fire over there. Yep. Follow us, give us a like, and if you could leave a review and obviously share on your social media platform of choice, that'd be great. Otherwise,
real quick, I want to do a shout out to that airships.net. I know I mentioned them before, but guys, be sure to check them out. That's an incredible website. A ton of information on pretty much anything that floats in the air. They got you covered. So if you want even more details, if you want to know like the operation manuals of how the Hindenburg worked amongst the crew, like they've got it. So yeah, huge shout out to them. They did an incredible job. A lot of the pictures that you'll see on our website, I got from them. So I'm crediting them for images that I'm using and the diagrams and whatnot. But yeah, they did an incredible job. So be sure to check them out. So yeah, until next time, I say keep it a hot mess.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.